His education and refinement distinguished him and made him noticeable among the French writers who were his contemporaries. But the stereotyped life in the centers of civilization did not entice him. He was more attracted by the original customs that preserved the distinctive and unique color of old times. That is why Prosper Mérimée wrote most of his short stories and plays about life in the remote provincial places of Spain and France. He was born in Paris in the early 19th century. The boy inherited from his parents the skepticism that was typical for that period and a delicate artistic taste. In his youth, he didn't intend to devote himself to literature at all, and only studying law did Prosper realize that his vocation was philology. He learned Greek, Spanish, English, and Russian, and read a lot of books written in these languages. At that time, French literature was trying to break free from the classical style that had been accepted for long, and the first play written by the 19-year-old Mérimée became a brave challenge to the traditions of classicism. Mérimée's friend Stendhal and the members of his literary society rated his work very high. Nevertheless, the author considered this play as one that did not deserve to be published. After he finished to study law in Paris, Prosper was appointed the secretary of a minister and then inspector general of the French historical monuments. Mérimée traveled on business a lot. Later he described his trips to Greece, Spain, and Turkey and made himself known as a brilliant historian and an expert in archaeology. Mérimée was young and cocky then. Year 1825 marked his entry into the theater field, the stronghold of classicism. He published The Theater of Clara Gazul, a collection of plays. One who inclined to mystification, Mérimée said that he was not the author of the book, but only the translator, and used the pseudonym Joseph Lestrange. In the foreword, he declared that these plays were written by Clara Gazul, a Spanish actress. He even placed Clara's portrait in some copies of the book. Actually, it was the portrait of Prosper himself in women's clothes. Mérimée wasn't going to give up mystification. Prosper signed his next book as Hyacinth Meglanovich. It was a collection of Illyrian ballads called Guzla that told about murders, vampires, and other devilry. The book caused a sensation in Europe and is considered to be an example of a smart and witty imitation of the Western Slavs' folk poetry. In the next 2 years, Mérimée used his own name and presented 2 more historical books to his readers, The Jacquerie and a chronicle of the reign of Charles IX. Then he invited his admirers to distant countries. The short story, Matteo Falcone, is a cruel story about Corsicans storming the fort, tells about the determination of the Russian people during the war with Napoleon. And at last, Damango, a story about African slave trade. This novella was full of indignation. In 1830, while in Spain, a country his heart and pen liked so much, Mérimée made friends with Count de Teba and his wife. One of the daughters of this noble couple, Eugene, became the Empress of France afterwards. Eugene developed a tender affection for Mérimée, and as an old friend, he was quite at home in the court. At the age of 40, Mérimée was made a senator and enjoyed the full confidence of Napoleon III. However, politics and his career played a secondary part in Mérimée's life, though they took a lot of time. He wrote only 2 narratives for 10 years, and in 1844 published the novella Arsène Guillot. Mérimée showed the moral superiority of a fallen woman over an aristocrat in this novella, and this caused a big scandal in the society. Another scandalous story was a strange romance of Mérimée and the famous writer Georges Sand. He courted her for about 2 years and was able to wake up in the soul of Georges Sand, who was emancipated and disappointed in men, the hope that a sensual love was still possible for her. But this love affair didn't continue for long. Afterwards, Prosper stated that the absence of modesty in this woman quenched all his desire. In 1845, Prosper Mérimée's most famous novella, Carmen, was published. The writer managed to create the character whose power doesn't yield to Hamlet, Don Quixote, or Don Juan, the character of a gypsy woman who valued liberty more than life. During the last 20 years of his life, Mérimée did indulge in almost no creative work, mainly dealing with literary criticism, writing articles about Pushkin, Gogol, Turgenev, and Tolstoy, and translating their works. He was the first to introduce Russian literature to France. The great French writer Prosper Mérimée, who the contemporaries call the New Shakespeare, died in 1870. There is an inscription on his gravestone. It says, "From George's Sand with love and apologies." After the death of the writer, two more short novellas, The Blue Room and Juman, were published, and 5 years later, the world with admiration listened to the story of the gypsy woman, Carmen, which Georges Bizet embodied in music.